I'm Tom Strange, curator at the Sigel Music Museum, and today I'm going to bring you 7 rather interesting smaller instruments that some of you would have perhaps never seen before, and certainly going into them a little bit will be a lot of fun. So without too much further ado, on this rather stormy, rainy day that we have today, it's been raining since Monday, and I think our expression is, thank you, Lord, that's enough. But we're going to be putting up with this through today into tomorrow. Fortunately, everything is nice and dry inside the storage area and the museum itself, and so we can proceed without too much concern. I wanted to start with a very unusual instrument that I had a chance to write up a little bit about in Piano Technician Journal a couple of years ago. This is known as the Orphica. And so some of these instruments that I'm going to talk about today are designed to be portable traveling instruments. In other words, the whole idea of the thing was to be able to take it out into nature and to play music in nature. This was very important, particularly in the late 18th century and early 19th century, as there was this interest in getting back to classical times and moving back towards nature and deriving things from nature. And so roughly 1795, this instrument is invented. It was originally designed to be a 2-string instrument, but they quickly found out that it was pretty compact for 2 strings, and the tension was a little bit more than what the initial design could stand. But it has a keyboard on it that's typically smaller in compass than you would normally find. Our 3-octave compass for a Steinway piano is about 492 millimeters. This one's around 375, so it would be a very small keyboard indeed for somebody that was just normally playing. What might such a thing sound like? Well, this one is going to need a little work before we're able to truly bring it up to tension and make it play. But that being said, we can hit a few notes. So not an unpleasant little sound. I can hold the instrument up just a little bit so that you can see the layout of it. But it's fairly conventional, sort of harp-shaped. We have a very small soundboard. All the rest pins over here on the right. And then the string lengths are actually not too bad for a bass string, but considering that this is intended to always be a fairly compact sort of instrument. The action is probably the most interesting part of it. I'm going to just check to make sure. This one, unlike most Viennese actions, this has no sled to raise it up, so the action is just as you see it. And as we pull this out, aha! So here we have this wonderful, perfect miniature Viennese keyboard. The pawls in the back for the escapement, and brass capsules, everything lined up on this particular instrument to produce a sound very much like what a Viennese piano would do, with a very light action. So pretty cool. I will put this back here for a moment and just say that the Orphica was in vogue from 1795 until into the 1820s, this one dating from approximately 1820. So it had a long enough life that we can say that its popularity seems to indicate that there were a number of these made. Many museums have them now. This was one of the ones that was still left in private hands. And we're just sort of slowly bringing it back to a point where people can at least explore it a little bit and understand. And here we have a small virginal harpsichord. This one made in 1907. I should stop and mention that all of the instruments but one that I'm going to describe today are from the Marlowe-Sigel collection. Most of you now know that we have the Marlowe-Sigel collection in Greenville, and we're enjoying being able to bring these instruments to you and tell you a little bit about them. Marlowe amassed a wonderful collection of instruments, and we have been so happy to have this to talk to you about it. So here's a little instrument that was made under the direction of Arnold Dolmetsch in Boston by Chickering and Company in 1907. The story there is that Arnold was making something of a name for himself in Europe and England, and he was approached by the representatives of Chickering in Europe to possibly come to America in 1906 and begin making instruments under the Chickering name because they felt that there was a lot of interest in this that was growing in America and that they would have some real sales. And they were interested in kind of, talking about the Chickering name and how Chickering was really, into all things that were musical. And so Dolmetsch agreed. By mid-1906, he was in Boston. 1906 to about mid-1910, they were making these instruments in the Chickering factory. There was an economic slump that began in early 1910, and it caught up with Chickering. They had to retrench, and they had to abandon their early music line of instruments. Dolmetsch went back to Europe. Chickering recovered, but they never went back to building these sort of instruments. And so all of these instruments are going to date from this period of 1906 to 1910. What might such a little instrument like this sound like? Well, we can play a bit. So I think it's a very beautiful little instrument. I will tell you that it's made in a very classical sort of style, and by that I mean that as you look at this instrument, it's a false inner outer, so this inner instrument is actually built into the case. They've done a very, very fine craftsmanship job. Everything that you look at looks as though it were something a little bit older than perhaps what it is. As you know, when we got into the 20th century and we started building harpsichords pretty much with our own engineering thoughts in mind, then many of those harpsichords turned out to be fairly bizarre. They had strange jacks, later incorporating metal and plastic and all kinds of things. But on this particular harpsichord, the jacks are all nice little wooden jacks. They have the lead weight that you would normally expect to find in a jack this size. The tongue, there's a bristle spring. It's quilled and plectrum throughout. And one of the nice parts about this instrument is that it's in very, very original condition. It was played only very lightly by its owner. And so what we were able to look at is essentially what Dolmetsch walked away from